Welcome back to CyHawk Talk. As you can see from the surroundings behind Ben, he's not underneath a subway system and inside the bowels of Aviva Stadium anymore. But we're just as excited for college football as we were last week. Ben, how's the jet lag hitting you?
Top of the evening to you, Ethan. How are you? Actually, I think that was more Australia. I never got the Irish accent down. I was on a train with a couple Cyclone fans. You can see them because everybody wears their stuff, and I thought, oh, what the heck? I'll try a little fake Irish accent on him to see if I could like blend in. But they figured me out pretty quick. It was not very good.
Yeah, I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall of the train car to see how poorly that went. Did it go better than your attempt at splitting the G?
About the same. Yeah, not great on either front, man. Yeah, and the jet lag, it's funny you say that. I was good all morning. I woke up super early, felt great. Hey, I'm gonna go get back on American time and just go kick some butt this week. And then 6 o'clock rolls around and I am dragging. So yeah, jet lag's kicking my butt today.
Well, we appreciate you soldiering through the jet lag for a little Cyhawk talk. And how about we go ahead and jump into that big matchup with South Dakota? I can't remember exactly where they're debuting in the Stats Perform FCS Top 25, but I'm pretty positive that was a top 10 team in that league coming into the year with a quarterback who is a little bit familiar with Jack Trice Stadium. So how about you kind of take us through what you're looking at for this matchup?
Yeah, Ethan, the Coyotes were number 5 in the FCS coaches poll, which, is a very respectable program. We talk a lot about, FCS teams, and people think when you play NCAA 26, like all the FCS teams are the same. It's just these FCS South or FCS East. There is a really big difference, and South Dakota is one of the better schools, right? They have 3 guys returning all conference, led by a quarterback, which is, what scares you if you're a team like Iowa State. And even more scary is redshirt senior Aiden Bauman's connection to Iowa State. It's a little bit of a revenge game. He started and played his 2 years of his career at Iowa State. Didn't actually play any games. He was stuck behind a guy named Brock Purdy on the depth chart at Iowa State. So Aiden decided to go and test his luck elsewhere, and he's done pretty well at South Dakota. So, it'll be interesting to see what kind of psychological factor he brings into it. By all accounts, it was a you know, amicable breakup. So I don't think it's, out for revenge, but you'd be silly to think that Aiden doesn't want to go out there and show his former teammates what's up.
Yeah, this South Dakota program is really interesting to me because my first year in Iowa covering the UNI Panthers, I went and watched a game in the Dakota Dome. They took on the Coyotes, and UNI did not make the playoffs that year. They were just on the fringe. It was Theo Day's junior year at quarterback, and they shredded the Coyotes. They just absolutely dominated them. It was to the point where it was the final game of the season. I asked Coach Farley. I said, Coach, were you guys trying to put up maybe some style points here to try and maybe convince the committee to let you in? And he said, no, that's not what we were doing at all. But man, it was a beat down. And now UNI's a program that's maybe at the bottom of that conference, and South Dakota is one of the best FCS programs in the country, and really kind of solidifying that core of Dakota schools that you talked about in the FCS. You got North Dakota State, South Dakota State, who are just superpowers, but now South Dakota and North Dakota have really kind of grown into their own roles and kind of starting to carry their own weight in that core grouping of schools there. And so I think that this is an incredibly tough FCS opponent to get after an Ireland game. And you kind of detailed how tough it's been to be a successful team coming out of playing in the Aer Lingus College Football Classic. So I guess what is the history of teams in their next game, their next 2 games, 3 games, 4 games, 5 games? Give me a little bit of what you outlined in that story.
Yeah, Ethan, the short run of it is it's not good. Teams coming back from Ireland have struggled since the Aer Lingus Classic resumed after COVID, which goes back to 2022. there have been 6 teams that have played in Ireland and come back to the United States to kind of continue with their season. And in those teams' first game back, they're combined 4-2. In those teams' next 4 games back, so you think the first month after getting back from Ireland, those teams combined to go 9-15. And if you look at the entire season after beginning a game in Ireland, the record goes to 29-45. So I said those are all numbers that would get just about any coach fired. And you can say, well, Nebraska in 2022 wasn't that great. Northwestern in 22 wasn't that great of a football team, as you know, probably a little bit too well on the Nebraska front.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Northwestern only won that game that year. Am I correct?
That's right.
Yeah,
They
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 won.
went
They were
1-11.
Irish national champs and then went 0-11 in the United States.
Yeah. So, maybe you could maybe get a better feel for how the effect of Ireland matters when you get back, when you look at point spreads and stuff. But I don't know. I look at that sample size, and it was certainly a sample size that had Matt Campbell's attention when I asked him about it in May. He was the one who kind of pointed me in the direction of saying, hey, these teams that have played have not done well coming back. So that's kind of how I knew to look for this story. And you look at teams like Notre Dame and Army and, or excuse me, Navy and Florida State, which again had a bad year last year. But these teams that are traditionally, respectable college football programs have struggled. So I don't know. There's something to it definitely of how do you come back from this game and stay focused. And as you mentioned, Ethan, the South Dakota team, it's no easy welcome back. I mean, they made the Final Four of the FCS postseason last year. So I don't know. I'm confident that Iowa State and Matt Campbell has put enough attention into this matter to not overlook South Dakota. They're not going to lose on Saturday because they overlooked them. I don't think the Cyclones are going to lose at all. But, maybe South Dakota has something to say. They're a 14.5 point dog, but we'll see.
And then one thing that was mentioned numerous times on the TV broadcast, which you did not have to watch because of our friends at Wallace's Garden Center sending you over to Ireland, but I was watching here in Iowa. They mentioned a number of times who the Cyclones lost at wide receiver last year or in the NFL draft this year. And you had talked a little bit about how they were going to replace those guys, and they brought in some transfer wide receivers that maybe didn't have the biggest impacts in a pretty wet game. I think that you can't take too much away from a game like that with how difficult it was to move the ball through the air, though Avery Johnson had a couple explosive passing plays. Take me through kind of the receiver situation and what you're tracking there.
For sure, Ethan. We knew Iowa State was going to be much more spread out with the receivers this year. They aren't going to have, for the millionth time you've heard this week, Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel walking through that door to put on the Iowa State uniform. So we knew they were going to be spread out. We talked about on this show guys like Brett Eskelson and Eli Green as players who had a very minimal role last year who were going to play bigger factors this year, and we saw that. But I think everybody was maybe a little disappointed. With not seeing hardly any of Xavier Townsend and Chase Sowell. These two kind of big name transfer receivers, the guys who you expected would maybe kind of fill some of that role. And we know, we've talked about on this show again, that both of those guys were banged up this season. I don't think that was a big secret for Cyclone fans. Both of those guys missed time in spring and fall camps, which is really tough when you're trying to acclimate and adjust. So I certainly expect that those guys will have a bigger role this season, but it was still a little disappointing for neither of them to catch a pass. Chase Sowell, he had 4 targets, I think, and he went the whole first half without catching a pass. The first play of scrimmage that Iowa State had in the second half, you could tell maybe, hey, let's throw Sowell a deep ball. And Rocco Becht underthrew it a little bit, wasn't able to connect. Townsend didn't officially have a target. I credited him with one because there was definitely a comeback play that Rocco Becht threw over the head of Townsend that got ruled maybe just a throwaway. But yeah, those guys, man, I expect him to have a bigger role. And maybe that starts against South Dakota. Maybe with South Dakota, you have a little bit more leeway, a little bit more, wiggle room, just time to get on the same page and kind of get those guys up to speed. So that's something I'm going to be watching is do Sowell and Townsend get more in the mix in game 2.
I don't know if running the ball or passing the ball is that big of a point of emphasis or a concern point coming out of that game when you're able to run the ball the way that Iowa State was able to run the ball late. And you're curious about who's going to be the starting running back looking at the show sheet here, who's going to get the majority of the touches. And I was really impressed with what Carson Hansen was able to do watching from 4,000 miles away. What's your take on this running back battle or touch rotation?
I thought how the Cyclones broke up the running back touches was really interesting. You saw on the first drive of, the season, Iowa State turning around, handing that ball to Carson Hansen. I think 4 of the first 5 plays went on the ground to Hansen for Iowa State. Maybe a little bit of that was weather induced. I mean, heck, I wouldn't have tried to throw the ball in that situation either. But you can see clearly there's an emphasis on getting him the ball and controlling the ground. Now, he kind of disappeared for a little bit in the second quarter, kind of in the middle of the game, and we saw a lot more Abu Sama, which wasn't as quite effective. Sama finished with 14 carries for 43 yards. Hansen was a little bit more effective, and I thought maybe with the way the game ended, they put the ball in Carson Hansen's hands through the air to pick up the critical 4th and 3 to win the game. Really trusting him on that last drive that the Cyclones had, where they got the ball with 6 minutes left and ran out the clock. Hansen played a critical role there. But maybe that was because he was a little bit more rested. Maybe the work and the touches Sama had got in the middle of the game allowed Hansen to operate as kind of the closer, bring him out of the bullpen and let Hansen finish this game. So I think that's going to be an interesting balance to see with the running backs this year. I mean, you don't want to have a situation like last year where you get guys hurt and you need to rotate them in. 2 running backs, it's tough to get through a whole college football season just playing 2 guys. So I think both of them are going to be vitally important. But if I'm trying to win a game, I'm putting the ball in Carson Hansen's hands.
There's having 2 running backs and not being able quite sure if you're going to be able to get through the entire college football season with just those two. And then there's what Iowa has going on their depth chart at running back. But we'll get into that right after this.
Hey, nobody asked me a question. Hey, I'm going to finish with this. Now, Rob, you got to ask me a question about the color black. Because I heard their athletic director made a comment about the color black. Could you give us a question about why Iowa State wears black?
Yeah, why is it?
Rob, we don't really care what color we wear, okay? Like, it's never been about a jersey color for us. It's never been about any of that. It's been about team, togetherness, and playing winning football. So, the question. Good, I forgot about that. Thank you, guys.
Welcome back to CyHawk Talk, where we finally, Ethan, get into a little bit of the Hawk portion of this rivalry after Iowa was sitting idle for week 0, watching and waiting for their opportunity to play Albany. If that's a game that doesn't get you fired up, man, I don't know what does. It sounds like these Iowa running backs are going to be fired up to get out there and go run through some holes. Tell me about the Iowa running back situation.
Yeah, I was just waiting, chomping at the bit to get that depth chart on Monday to finally get some clarity on some of these camp battles we've been hearing about. Asked Coach Omar Young, the running backs coach, on media day, hey, Kamari Moulton was the starter going into 2024. Is it safe to assume he's going to be the starter going into 2025? And he says, well, you can say that, but I think that this is a team that's not going to necessarily have a bell cow. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but basically he says, no, you can't rely on Kamari Moulton being the starter. And so we get that depth chart on Monday, and I'm like, great, we'll finally know who the left tackle is. We'll finally know who the long snapper is. We'll finally know who the running back is. And lo and behold, the Orr monster comes to eat me alive there on the depth chart, because we got an Orr at left tackle, first string left tackle. It's both Trevor Lauk and Jack Doetzler sharing the top spot. And then a running back, it's even crazier. We have an Orr between Kamari Moulton and TJ Washington at the top of the running back depth chart. And then 2 is an Orr between Xavier Williams and Jazian Patterson. So we got 4 running backs sharing 2 spots on the depth chart. And it's like, gee, I wonder who's going to play on Saturday. I think it's going to be all of them, obviously, but it's like, who's going to get the majority of the touches? I think it's safe to assume Kamari is going to be the first guy out there on the first series, but after that, it's anyone's best guess. And then we go to the press conference on Tuesday, ask Coach Ferentz, "Hey, what's the situation at running back?" And he says, "Oh, I think it's clearly cloudy." And then he mentions a fifth guy on true freshman running back Nathan McNeil, who tore it up at Kids Day earlier this month, as another guy who they've given the green light to. He's the only true freshman they've given the green light to play on Saturday. And so we have 5 running backs who we can reasonably assume are going to see the field for at least significant burn. You're not going to waste one of your 4 games for a freshman in Nathan McNeil. Like, if they're planning on trying to preserve that red shirt, that 4-game red shirt, you're not going to waste, him, that 1 game for him, by using him for 1 series, right? So the running back position is just an absolute cluster. So I'm really keenly interested on who's going to emerge in that battle. I did talk to Kamari on Tuesday, and he told me, I have a chip on my shoulder. I want to do anything I can to, help this team win. He's not necessarily like, I need to be the guy. I need to get, 30 touches a game. He told me that if someone else scores and I'm on the bench and someone else scores, it's almost like I scored. So they have that understanding that they might not be the right guy for the exact moment. But he also said, thinking back on last season, I asked him what he learned from losing the starting job to Caleb Johnson. He said, I learned that I don't want that to happen again, and I need to, be as consistent as possible and do the things that are going to prevent that from happening again. So I think Kamari's probably going to be the guy who gets the majority of the touches, but this team really likes what TJ Washington does. Xavier Williams, they've had positive things to say. And Jazzy Patterson has had plenty of experience. He had a nice run in the CyHawk game, I believe, 2 years ago. So 5 guys that I think this team really likes. I think Kamari is going to ultimately be the one who probably gets to occupy the top spot on the depth chart 4 games into the season. But I'm keenly interested to see how that shakes out on Saturday and who gets the majority of the touches. And then at left tackle, kind of a similar story. Who looks better? Ferentz said on Tuesday that Trevor Lauk is probably going to be the guy who gets the first series, gets the nominal start. But I'm curious to see who looks better, who plays more, and who emerges there. And then at long snapper, since I did mention it, it's going to be Ike Speltz that gets the start. They just didn't list it on the depth chart.
It feels like college football coaches now play games with these depth charts. I'm not sure if you saw what New Mexico did. I believe this was in response to Michigan just not issuing a depth chart. New Mexico, listed movie characters like Ethan Hunt from Mission Impossible, and I think Ricky Bobby from Talladega Nights might have even been on there.
I'm really interested. I'm really interested in this Forrest Gump character they have at running back. I think he could be real dynamic at running back.
I hear he runs pretty well.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing.
So we'll see, man. I mean, we'll learn so much more from what we actually see on the field than we will with any coach giving us a depth chart or these, Big 12 injury reports or Big 10 injury reports. Coaches will lie to us on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, but they won't lie, to the team on Saturday.
No, they will not. No, they will not. And Coach Ferentz did say the depth chart's fluid. He said, there are a couple names in permanent ink, but most of them are in pencil, meaning they're subject to change. And he even asked at one point, he said, Xavier Williams, he was the other guy we had listed at running back, right? So he wasn't even 100% clear on who they had listed on the depth chart. So that if that tells you how seriously you need to be taking that first depth chart of the season, I think that's a pretty good indicator.
On the defensive side of the ball, Ethan, how much can we possibly learn about Iowa when they play, an FCS opponent like Albany that's a huge underdog? Do you expect, to learn anything? What are you going to be looking for on the defensive side?
Yeah, I'm just looking to see if they pass the eye test. I mean, last year you think about they started out with Illinois State and really handled the Redbirds, caused, I believe, 4 turnovers in that game. Illinois State couldn't get the ball past midfield all game, really lacked any explosive plays. They did lose, I believe, their starting running back very early in that game, and he was a notable playmaker coming into the game, a guy who was kind of in the mix for an all-MVFC, all-conference honor the year prior, so that was a big loss. And they were rotating at quarterback, so that's never a recipe for success on offense, in my opinion. So there were some aspects to why the Redbirds looked so bad against Iowa's defense last year, but I think that's kind of an indicator of, like, you watched that game and you knew, I didn't really have any concerns for a veteran defense being able to replicate what it had done the year before, last year, but that just kind of put to bed any concerns. Like, oh yeah, these guys, if they're going to manhandle FCS opponent like that, where they could have, overlooked them and gotten burned for a deep ball here or there, but they didn't. I think that's kind of the performance you're looking, because you really don't know. There's a lot of unknowns on this team, are on this defense, because of what they lost at linebacker, what they lost in the defensive secondary. And so I think you're looking to see these new guys come in, take the game super seriously, and just kind of manhandle a weaker opponent. You're expected to win this game, so don't give them anything. I think we saw a little bit of that in the Troy game last year when Devontae Ross had a big touchdown catch and a big punt return. Maybe overlooking a weaker opponent, letting them get behind you a little bit and giving up an explosive play. And that's something that defensive coordinator Phil Parker really harps on. It's no explosives. He doesn't want to see any runs longer than 15, 20 yards and any passes longer than 20, 25 yards. And so I'm looking for zero explosive plays allowed to you, Albany, because this is, Illinois State was a fringe top 25 team going into this season last year. Albany is picked 12th in their conference, in a weaker conference than Illinois State competes in. So this is a bad FCS team. I need to see domination.
The reason to tune in, if what I'm hearing is correct, might just be to see how Mark Gronowski looks. I mean, that's the reason for all the intrigue and a lot of the interest with Iowa's quarterback. What are you going to be looking for with Gronowski?
Yeah, I can definitely hyper focus on the quarterback at times. I think there was a week last year where I wrote 4 quarterback stories in 2 days. And so I try and stay away from hyper fixating on quarterback a little too much, or I'm trying to get better about it. But it is the most important position on the field. So on Saturday, I'm looking at what the chemistry looks like between him and his receivers, especially because he missed spring. He said yesterday that one of the trickiest things is just kind of getting a feel for how they're going to run around and where they're going to be. And so I'm curious to see how he was able to catch up. When I asked him, you said you felt a little behind in summer and we're trying to play catch up. Are you where you want to be right now? And he said, yes. I don't think you're going to get a different answer from a guy going into the season than, yeah, I feel comfortable with where I'm at right now. Because if a guy says no, that's going to freak people out. But I trust him. I think that he is comfortable with where he's at. And so I'm just curious to see if the play matches what we heard on Tuesday. So does he have good chemistry? Are the balls delivered accurately on time, or are they behind a guy? Is he having to scramble around a lot? He's a guy who's had to scramble less and less as his career's gone on. I asked him about that at media day, and he said, I think I'm just getting to be a better passer. And so I think if we see him run more than you would expect, that's maybe an indicator that things aren't necessarily perfect in terms of chemistry with those wide receivers and getting a feel for where they're going to be and where they're at.
I'm certainly looking forward to watching him, string together a couple drives and seeing this guy in an extended look, right? Like the social media clips, you can't judge anything based on what you see on, 12-second social media clip.
Yeah, I mean, in a perfect world, he tears it up for a half, and then we get to see Hank Brown for a half because they're winning by so much. We'll see. The last time Mark Gronowski played Albany 2 years ago in an FCS semifinal game, he tore him apart for just under 300 yards and 3 touchdowns and over 75% completion percentage. I don't think we're necessarily looking for that on Saturday, but if we get that on Saturday, I think that Hawkeye fans will be pretty pleased and pretty confident going into the CyHawk game.
Should we get into the 3 headlines for Iowa State and Iowa on Sunday?
I think I got you beat this week, so let's do it.
All right. I don't think so, because my first one is going to be pretty solid. Coaching 101. Matt Campbell wins 101st game as a head coach. And this goes back to his time, of course, starting at Toledo. Matt Campbell has seriously put on a coaching clinic at Iowa State. One thing I was kicking around was, I don't know if there's a football coach in America more important to his university than Matt Campbell is to Iowa State. When you think about the program elevating to a different stratosphere under Matt Campbell and the 10 seasons he's been here now, he's so important to Iowa State. And it's kind of crazy that in Dublin, Ireland was his 100th career victory as a head coach. And I think against South Dakota, he gets 101. My second Sunday's headline today is going to be Bauman bows out. I think it's just going to be too much for Aiden Bauman. The defense that he probably thought Iowa State had back in 2020 and 2021 is not the defense that they have now. I think this Iowa State defense is so good. The fact that they have all these linebackers back, a defensive scheme that has stayed consistent under John Haycock, maybe the best front seven when you think about Dom Orange, in the Big 12. I just have a lot of confidence with the way they handled Avery Johnson. And, they could get better in the secondary. There's going to be some young guys back there who got cooked, to put it absolutely bluntly, a couple times. But you expect that to be a little bit better. And it's easy to get cooked against Jace Brown in Kansas State. I think that those guys will be a little bit in a better situation against the receivers that South Dakota has. So I think Bauman is going to bow out and the Cyclones are going to get this win. And I think my last headline is going to be stress relief. Iowa State is not going to be in a fourth quarter game against South Dakota. Rocco Becht kind of joked with us. He wins another fourth quarter game, one score game. And he's like, guys, I promise I'm trying, to make them a little bit more comfortable. I don't want to keep winning like this. But, if the Cyclones do get in that situation, they've kind of flipped the narrative from a few years ago when they were losing all of these one-score games. So I do think that the Cyclones are able to kind of take a breath, sit back, and have a little bit of a stress relief with a multi-score win against South Dakota.
I'm not sure about that last one, but I'll get into that a little bit later. Looking at Sunday's headlines today for Iowa's matchup with Albany on Saturday. Game kicks off at 5 p.m. inside Kinnick Stadium, and it's going to be on Fox Sports 1, YouTube TV. Listeners, watchers, viewers, whatever, don't have to worry about it anymore. Fox and YouTube TV reached a temporary agreement, so this game will be on your TVs if you're a YouTube TV subscriber. So you can worry not about being able to catch that if you're not able to get to Kinnick Stadium on Saturday. But my first takeaway or Sunday's headlines today is going to be backyard football. And not in the way that it looks sloppy and you're drawing up plays in the dirt or anything like that. But it's going to be backyard football because I just think it's going to look like pitch and catch out there for the Hawkeyes. It's going to look like they're playing, drills against air. I think it's going to be crisp. I think it's going to be clean. I don't think it's going to be a necessarily super intriguing game to watch by the end of it. I think there might be some channel hopping or pulling up the multi-view a little bit. But I think it's going to be like backyard football. It's going to be comfortable and it's going to be clean. Next one, it's going to be one away from greatness. Ferentz with this win is going to tie Woody Hayes, the Ohio State legend, in wins in the Big Ten among coaches. And so he's going to be one win away from the winningest head coach in the Big Ten. And that's going to set up a pretty big matchup, which is why third headline, all eyes on Ames. This is kind of dual faceted here. All eyes are going to be on Ames because that's where the CyHawk game takes place in week 2, where Ferentz is going to have that chance to pass Hayes. But it's going to be all eyes on Ames because you're going to be looking to be like, hey, Iowa State, South Dakota locked in a battle here. I think if you look at last year, Iowa State, it was a pretty tight game with North Dakota. It was 7-3 until Iowa State adds a touchdown before half. It's 14-3, and then it's 14-3 through the entire third quarter. You're feeling a little uneasy if you're a Cyclone fan, and then it's 21-3. They add a touchdown in the fourth quarter, and you get an 18-point win. So maybe you feel a little bit better going into a CyHawk game. But I think it's going to be a little bit of an uneasy game, and I think that some Iowa fans are going to be kind of rubbernecking the Cyclone game while Iowa's maybe putting Albany to sleep pretty handedly.
There's certainly a narrative out there that is, I can tell, very appealing for a lot of people that, coming back from Dublin against a good FCS team, this is a little bit of a trap game. It's interesting that, it seems like you're kind of buying that side of it. I'm kind of buying, Matt Campbell's side of it where, hey, we're going to be prepared for this. Ethan, with you coming to visit Ames next week, it sounds like we got to have a little dinner bet on the 14.5-point spread here. What are you thinking?
Iowa State's favored by 14.5.
That's the line I saw. Is it, has it changed?
I haven't looked at the line for Iowa State, but that's stunning to me. I would think that you'd show a little bit more respect to the Coyotes.
Well, let me check. I mean, we can, of course, tweet it out, what the spread is and maybe organize some official stakes and put something on that.
I'll buy you dinner Saturday night in Ames after the CyHawk game because it's an 11 a.m. kickoff. I'll buy you dinner after that game if Iowa State manages to cover the spread this weekend, whatever it is.
I'll do the same if the Coyotes of South Dakota manage to cover the spread.
All right, there's a first for CyHawk Talk. We've got our first bet. It's going to be dinner, and I'm going to wring Ben's pocketbook dry in the after the CyHawk game when I win that bet. But thank you for watching. We'll be back on Sunday for a Sunday rewind. We'll go over those two games. Be sure to tune in for that. Thank you for watching.